She can't hurt you anymore, not because she changed, but because you finally did. Pain has a way of teaching us lessons we never asked for. Sometimes we hold on to people who have already let us go. We replay memories, reread messages, and reopen wounds that were slowly healing. But there comes a moment when you realize your peace is more valuable than your attachment. She can't hurt you anymore, not because she stopped trying, but because you stopped allowing. Growth begins when you choose dignity over desperation, silence over arguments, and self-respect over emotional dependency. Today, we speak about strength, healing, and the power of walking away with grace. If this message speaks to your heart, subscribe and walk this journey of strength and healing with me. Self-respect over attachment means choosing your worth over your feelings. Sometimes attachment convinces you that you cannot live without someone. It whispers that losing them means losing yourself. But attachment is often rooted in fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of not finding someone else. Self-respect, on the other hand, is rooted in truth. It reminds you that you deserve consistency, honesty, and care. When you place attachment above self-respect, you begin to accept behavior you once said you would never tolerate. You justify disrespect, you ignore red flags, you lower your standards just to keep someone in your life. Slowly, you trade your dignity for temporary comfort. You answer late-night messages that disturb your peace. You forgive apologies that come without change. You stay in conversations that drain your spirit. All of this because attachment makes you believe that holding on is better than letting go. But self-respect changes everything. It gives you the strength to walk away from what diminishes you. It teaches you that love should not cost you your mental stability. It reminds you that begging for attention is beneath your value. When self-respect becomes stronger than attachment, your decisions become clearer. You stop chasing. You stop explaining yourself repeatedly. You stop proving your worth to someone who refuses to see it. Self-respect does not mean you stop caring. It means you care about yourself enough to protect your heart. It means you understand that not everyone is meant to stay. You may miss them, you may think about them, but you will not allow them to disrespect you. You choose peace over chaos. You choose dignity over desperation. You choose yourself even when it hurts. Letting go is one of the hardest decisions a person can make, especially when the heart is still attached. You may know something is not good for you, yet you struggle to release it. You hold on to memories, to promises, to the version of someone you hoped they would become. You tell yourself to be patient, to give it more time, to try one more conversation. But deep inside, you feel the weight of what is no longer meant for you. The power of letting go begins when you accept reality instead of fighting it. It is not weakness to walk away, it is wisdom. Sometimes we believe strength means staying and enduring everything. But true strength is recognizing when something is breaking you instead of building you. Letting go does not erase the love you felt. It does not deny the moments that were beautiful. It simply acknowledges that not every beautiful beginning has a healthy ending. Holding on to what hurts you drains your energy, it steals your focus, it keeps you stuck in cycles of hope and disappointment. You wake up thinking about them, you sleep wondering if they will change, and your peace becomes dependent on their behavior. That is not love, that is emotional captivity. Letting go frees your mind from constant overthinking. It allows your heart to breathe again. There is also dignity in letting go quietly. You do not need revenge. You do not need dramatic exits. Sometimes the most powerful move is silence. You step back, not because you stopped caring, but because you started valuing yourself more. You realize that chasing someone who is unsure about you only lowers your own worth. You understand that closure does not always come from another person. Sometimes it comes from your decision to stop trying. Letting go creates space. Space for healing, space for growth, space for better opportunities and healthier connections. When your hands are tightly holding on to what is leaving, they cannot receive what is arriving. Release teaches you trust. Trust that what is meant for you will stay without force. It teaches you patience. Patience with the process of healing. It teaches you faith. Faith that losing someone who could not value you is not a loss but protection. Emotional maturity is not about age. It is about awareness. It is the ability to understand your feelings without allowing them to control your actions. Many people feel deeply, but not everyone knows how to respond wisely to those feelings. When someone hurts you, the immature reaction is to react instantly, to argue, to blame, to send long messages filled with frustration. Emotional maturity pauses before responding. It chooses reflection over reaction. When you are emotionally mature, you do not let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. You recognize that anger fades, sadness softens, and disappointment loses intensity with time. Instead of speaking in the heat of the moment, You give yourself space. You understand that words spoken in pain can create wounds that last longer than the pain itself. You learn to control your tongue, your tone, and your impulses. Emotional maturity also means taking responsibility. It is easy to point fingers and make someone else the villain in your story. It is harder to look within and ask yourself where you ignored signs, where you overinvested, or where you compromised your standards. You stop saying they ruined me and start saying I allowed more than I should have. This shift is powerful because it puts you back in control of your life. Another sign of emotional maturity is accepting that not everyone will understand you. You stop trying to force people to see your value. You stop explaining yourself repeatedly to those who have already decided not to listen. You understand that your peace is more important than winning arguments. Sometimes the most mature response is silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have nothing to prove. Emotionally mature people do not chase validation. They do not measure their worth by how quickly someone replies or how loudly someone praises them. Their confidence is internal. They know their value even when others fail to recognize it. This stability prevents them from begging for attention or lowering their standards for temporary affection. Emotional maturity also requires empathy. You begin to understand that people act from their own wounds, fears, and limitations. This does not mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you do not carry bitterness in your heart. You forgive, not to excuse their behavior, but to free yourself from resentment. You let go without hatred because you understand that holding on to anger only harms you. There is strength in staying calm when chaos surrounds you. There is power in walking away without drama. Emotional maturity transforms heartbreak into growth. It teaches you that every painful experience carries a lesson. Instead of becoming colder, you become wiser. Instead of becoming bitter, you become balanced. You choose dignity over revenge, patience over impulsiveness, and understanding over emotional outbursts. Healing through silence is a strength that many people misunderstand. In a world where everyone feels the need to explain themselves, defend themselves, and constantly express every emotion online, silence feels unfamiliar. Yet silence carries a depth that noise can never reach. When you are hurt, the first instinct is often to react. You want to send that long message. You want to correct the narrative. You want to prove your side of the story. But healing does not always begin with words. Sometimes it begins when you choose not to speak. Silence protects your dignity. When emotions are intense, words can easily become weapons. You may say things you regret. You may expose vulnerabilities to someone who does not value them. By stepping back, you give yourself space to process instead of pouring your pain into someone who may misuse it. Silence is not weakness, it is discipline. It is the decision to guard your heart instead of displaying it for someone who has already shown carelessness. Through silence, you begin to hear yourself more clearly. Without constant conversations and external opinions, you face your own thoughts. You reflect on what truly happened. You recognize patterns you once ignored. You notice how certain behaviors made you feel small, anxious, or unappreciated. Noise distracts you from self-awareness, but silence sharpens it. In that quiet space, clarity begins to grow. Silence also shifts power. When you constantly respond to someone who disrespects you, you feed their control over your emotions. They learn that your peace depends on their actions. But when you withdraw calmly, without dramatic announcements, the dynamic changes. You are no longer reacting to every move. You are no longer available for emotional games. Your absence speaks louder than arguments ever could. There is also healing in not explaining your departure. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Some people understand through words, others only understand through consequences. When you repeatedly communicate your boundaries and they continue to cross them, silence becomes the boundary. You stop repeating yourself. You stop negotiating your worth. You allow your distance to communicate what your words could not. Healing through silence does not mean suppressing emotions. It means processing them privately and wisely. You still feel the sadness. You still experience the disappointment. But instead of broadcasting it or directing it toward the person who hurt you, you sit with it. You pray, reflect, journal, or speak to trusted people who genuinely care. You transform pain into insight rather than into conflict. Silence also teaches patience. Healing is not instant. When you step away, there may be moments of loneliness. You may question your decision. You may feel the urge to break the silence just to feel connected again. But growth happens in those uncomfortable spaces. Each day you remain silent. You build emotional resilience. You prove to yourself that you are capable of surviving without the constant presence of someone who disrupted your peace. Over time, silence softens the intensity of the hurt. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. The urge to defend yourself fades. The need for their validation weakens. You realize that closure was never in another conversation. It was in your ability to stop seeking one. Silence becomes your shield, your teacher, and your path back to inner stability. You begin to value calmness more than being understood. You prefer tranquility over temporary emotional relief. You understand that not every battle deserves your voice, and not every misunderstanding requires correction. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the one you choose not to make. Detachment brings peace in a way that attachment never can. Attachment often feels intense, emotional, and consuming. It convinces you that your happiness is tied to a person, a response, a presence. Your mood shifts based on their attention. Your confidence rises and falls depending on how they treat you. You begin to revolve around someone else's choices. Detachment changes that center. It brings you back to yourself. Detachment is not about becoming cold or heartless. It is about loving without losing yourself. It is caring without making someone the source of your identity. When you are attached in an unhealthy way, you fear losing them more than you fear losing your peace. You tolerate inconsistency because you are afraid of absence. You accept confusion because clarity might lead to goodbye. Detachment frees you from that fear. When you detach, you stop expecting someone to complete you. You understand that you were whole before they arrived and you will remain whole if they leave. This realization shifts your emotional balance. Instead of clinging to every word and analyzing every action, you observe calmly. You no longer overthink delayed replies or small changes in tone. Your stability does not depend on their behavior. Detachment also teaches you acceptance. You accept people as they are rather than as you wish them to be. You stop trying to change them. You stop trying to convince them to value you. If they show inconsistency, you believe it. If they show disinterest, you respect it. Instead of fighting reality, you align yourself with it. This acceptance removes unnecessary suffering. Peace enters your life. When you release control, attachment often carries the illusion that if you try harder, love harder, sacrifice more, things will improve. You overextend yourself emotionally. You become the one who always initiates, always fixes, always forgives. Detachment reminds you that relationships require mutual effort. You stop carrying what was never yours alone to carry. With detachment comes emotional independence. You still appreciate companionship, but you do not depend on it for validation. You do not beg for reassurance. You do not chase someone who is unsure about you. You understand that genuine connection does not require force. What is meant for you will stay through ease, not pressure. Detachment also reduces anxiety. When you are deeply attached in an unhealthy way, your mind rarely rests. You question everything. You replay conversations. You imagine worst-case scenarios. Your thoughts become heavy. But when you detach, you allow things to unfold naturally. You stop trying to predict every outcome. You accept that uncertainty is part of life, and you become comfortable with it. There is freedom in not needing constant answers. You no longer demand explanations for every action. You understand that sometimes silence itself is an answer. Instead of chasing clarity from someone who avoids giving it, you create clarity within yourself by stepping back. You choose your peace over prolonged confusion. Detachment strengthens your boundaries. You recognize when something disrupts your inner calm, and you respond by adjusting your distance. You do not announce it dramatically. You simply reposition yourself. You invest energy where it is reciprocated. You withdraw from environments that drain you. This quiet shift protects your heart without hardening it. Through detachment, you also learn gratitude without dependency. You appreciate the good moments without fearing their end. You enjoy connection without clinging to permanence. You understand that everything in life is temporary, and that realization encourages presence rather than possession. Detachment allows forgiveness to come more easily. When you no longer feel emotionally entangled, resentment loses its grip. You see situations more objectively. You understand that people act according to their level of awareness and maturity. This perspective reduces anger and increases wisdom. As you practice detachment, your confidence grows. You realize you are capable of standing alone. You recognize your ability to rebuild, to adapt, to move forward. You no longer view endings as destruction, but as redirection. Your heart becomes calmer. Your reactions become measured. Your expectations become healthier. Peace is not found in controlling others or securing guarantees. It is found in mastering your own responses. Detachment gives you that mastery. It teaches you to participate in life without being consumed by it. It reminds you that your tranquility is more valuable than any temporary attachment. You begin to move with quiet strength, grounded in self-awareness. no longer shaken by every shift in someone else's behavior. Growth after heartbreak is one of the most transformative experiences a person can go through. In the beginning, it does not feel like growth. It feels like loss, like emptiness, like something has been taken from you. Your routine changes, the conversations stop, the future you imagined disappears. There is a silence where laughter once existed. In those early moments, all you can see is what ended. You focus on what went wrong, what you could have done differently, what you wish you had said. The pain feels heavy, and the idea of growth feels distant. Heartbreak forces you to confront yourself. When someone leaves your life, you are left alone with your thoughts. You begin to question your choices, your standards, your boundaries. You replay memories and notice details you once ignored. You see the red flags you painted green. You recognize the moments you settled for less than you deserved. This awareness is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Growth begins with honesty. Through heartbreak, you learn resilience. You wake up on days when you do not feel strong, yet you continue with your responsibilities. You smile in public while privately healing. You resist the urge to text when loneliness hits. Each small act of discipline builds inner strength. You realize that even though your heart was broken, you are still functioning, still breathing, still moving forward. This realization reshapes your perception of yourself. Heartbreak also teaches you about attachment. You begin to understand whether you loved the person or the idea of them. You question whether you were in love with who they truly were or with the potential you imagined. This clarity helps you approach future relationships with greater wisdom. You become more attentive to consistency, effort, and emotional availability. You stop falling for words without actions. Growth after heartbreak involves rebuilding your identity. Sometimes in relationships, you merge your life so deeply with someone else that you forget parts of yourself. You adjust your preferences, you compromise your interests, you reshape your schedule around them. When the relationship ends, you are forced to rediscover who you are independently. You return to hobbies you once neglected. You reconnect with friends you distanced yourself from. You spend time understanding your own needs without influence. There is also spiritual growth in heartbreak. Pain humbles you. It reminds you that human beings are imperfect and that expectations can lead to disappointment. You begin to rely less on people for complete fulfillment and more on your inner stability. You reflect more deeply. You pray with more sincerity. You seek meaning beyond temporary emotions. This shift creates a stronger foundation within you. Heartbreak refines your standards. What you once tolerated, you no longer accept. You become clearer about what you want and what you will not allow. You understand that chemistry is not enough without character. You value emotional safety over excitement. You prioritize peace over intensity. These changes do not come from bitterness, but from experience. Growth also means forgiving yourself. You may blame yourself for ignoring warning signs or staying longer than you should have. But self-blame keeps you trapped in the past. When you forgive yourself, you release shame. You acknowledge that you made decisions based on the knowledge and emotions you had at the time. You choose compassion over criticism toward your own heart. Over time, the pain softens. What once triggered tears becomes a memory that no longer controls your mood. You can speak about the experience without your voice shaking. You can see their name without your chest tightening. This emotional distance is evidence of healing. You did not rush it. You allowed time to do its work while you focused on self-improvement. Growth after heartbreak reshapes your confidence. You realize that someone leaving did not reduce your worth. Rejection does not equal inadequacy. It simply means misalignment. This understanding prevents you from internalizing someone else's inability to appreciate you. You stand taller, knowing that your value is not determined by who stays or who leaves. You also develop patience. You no longer rush into connections out of loneliness. You take time to observe, to evaluate, to understand. You are comfortable being alone because you have survived the fear of it. Solitude no longer intimidates you. It strengthens you. With growth comes emotional balance. You still believe in love, but you approach it with awareness. You remain open yet cautious. You give, but you also expect reciprocity. You care deeply, but you do not abandon yourself in the process. You understand that love should add to your life, not consume it. Heartbreak becomes a teacher rather than a tragedy. It exposes weaknesses that needed attention. It highlights wounds that required healing long before the relationship began. It pushes you towards self-discovery. It forces maturity. It transforms naive hope into informed optimism. Instead of breaking you permanently, it reshapes you into someone wiser, stronger, and more aligned with your true worth.